Arts. Also should get an award for the longest title for an award, that's for sure. Also like to thank Tim. He is been helping along with Kristen this past semester, and we all really appreciate everything that he's done. Also like to thank the university. I'd like to thank Christopher Moyer, who is the managing editor for this issue. Did a wonderful job. And finally, I'd like to thank the current managing editor, Ruth Ballman, for all that she's been doing recently and to do for this particular event. And also give her a little shout out. She recently won for poetry an AWP Intro to Journals Award, which is very, very nice. So for our first reading, I'd like to introduce Anders Carlson Wee. He was a professional rollerblader before he studied wilderness survival and started hopping freight trains to see the country. He has traveled through the forests of the South, the cornfields of the Midwest, the prairies of the West, and the blue-hued mountains of Alaska. This past year, he walked on foot across Croatia and Bosnia through the Dinaric Alps, if I'm even pronouncing it right, camping in the backyards of the farmers he met. He is the winner of the 2012 Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Poetry Prize and was recently nominated for a Pushcart Prize by the Board of Pushcart Editors. His work has appeared in Ninth Letter, New Delta Review, Blue Stem Quarterly, and Best New Poets 2012. He is currently an MFA candidate in poetry at Vanderbilt University. Everybody please welcome Anders.
Thank you for the introduction, and thanks everybody for coming out. This is my first time to Memphis, so I'm excited to be here. Can you all hear me? Is the mic good? Okay. So yeah, I'll just get into some poems here. I'm going to read 4 poems for you. This first one is about a time I spent living in the Cascade Mountains in Washington State. There's this mountain called Tin Pan. And I camped at the Tarn Lake below it for a while and just sort of lived there. And I built a raft and fished for trout every day. So this poem's about that experience. It's called Gathering Firewood on Tin Pan. I bundle them against my chest, not sure if they're dry enough, gauging how long they'll keep me warm by the thickness. I step around carefully, looking for the deadest, searching the low places for something small and old that will catch. I pick up the dander loosened as my father folds his hands, lowers his head, the rolling thunder on the surface of a nail. I pick up the cross that seesaws his chest with each step. The day I lost my faith, the night my dog ran away and came back sick. The battery pump of her final breath. Still wondering if she left alone or if my father walked her out of this world. Still wondering what he used for a leash. I go further into the trees and find more fuel. My friends faded on Oxy and Percocet. My cousin Scott buried young in the floodplain. My brothers and the ways I've mistreated them. Living it over and over each night. My father walking into every dream. My fire not bright enough to reveal anything. Not even his face. Not even the leash. Okay, this next one is actually the poem that's in this issue of The Pinch, so if you don't have your copy, pick it up. But yeah, this one's called Ice Fisher. I'm from northern Minnesota, and if you live up there, sooner or later you end up on a lake fishing, digging holes and stuff. And this is offhand, but there's actually a competition in northern Minnesota every spring where they park a truck out on a lake, and everyone places bets on what day the ice will crack and it will sink to the bottom. So this lake is filled with old trucks. Anyway, this poem isn't about that, but this one's called Ice Fisher. Oh, and the other thing you might want to know, this poem mentions an owl called the Gray Ghost. It's an owl in northern Minnesota, and it looks a little bit like the great horned owl, but it weighs half as much because its bones are very thin. Okay, so this one's called Ice Fisher. The man sets the fish house far out on the lake, drills the hole, scoops the slush out with a ladle. Silence and the lake and the man. The pine hills folded in fog, faded to ash and gunpowder. The maple leaves fallen and lost in the snow. The gray ghost, thin and sinewy, moving off through the coal-black remnants of branches. If you cannot see it in winter, you will never see it. The man goes into the dark house and lowers his lure. The deep hole glows. The water is clear. The low hoot of the owl simmers the shore meridian as the evening comes on and the hole darkens. He breathes into his hands. He lets out a little more line. All right, this next one's is about a flood that happened in 1997 on the Red River of the North, which is the border between Minnesota and North Dakota. And that river flows north, so in the spring, like there's always this big flood that happens because the ice sheets are still frozen up in Canada, and all the water backs up. And it's a clay-rich soil, so it can't get absorbed. So there's a lot of flooding there. And this is about a flood I kind of lived through when I was pretty young. So this one's called Flood of 97. In the flood of 97, everything went to shit. Somewhere in Canada, the Red River clogged and coated the roads in downtown Fargo as high as the stop signs. Not much was saved. Dark water churned for a moment as the river tipped over. Then a stillness filled the basements. It was the same all over town. The Rambler rooftops looming like islands. Foundations rotting in the afternoon silence. Everybody camping in a cousin's backyard or staying with an uncle down in Fergus. The old folks at eventide had to move to Oak Grove and spent 2 weeks sleeping on cots in the brick chapel. When the ice sheets broke and the brown water flowed up to Hudson Bay, the basements drained and people went in their own front doors like strangers. They ran their hands over water-warped walls, went in the kitchen, and swore the fridge had been moved. All summer, people found rusty things they didn't recognize. Things that must have floated in from other homes. Fathers walked the silty streets and knocked on doors, trying to find the rightful owner of a shovel or a broom. An elderly woman returned to eventide and discovered a soggy photograph on the mildewed carpet in her tiny room. She peered at the blurry faces and tried to remember going to Egypt, wondered who the man could be, standing beside her at the Sphinx. All right, this one's the last one I'm going to read. And this one is called Riding the Owl's Eye. And that's the Owl's Eye is a term, if you ride freight trains, there's a spot that you can hide in and it's a car called a Canadian Grainer, and it has this hole that you can hide in, and that hole's called the Owl's Eye. So it's like it's a hiding spot on a freight train. That's what that refers to. And this is about a trip that I took up north in Canada. It's called Riding the Owl's Eye. Out of all the dumpsters that could have been empty, all the weather that could have bloomed over the prairie and ruined me, all the cars that could have sped by without hesitating and left me on the fog line, nameless forever, the trains that could have taken my legs, The hobos that could have pulled a switchblade and opened me like a flood enfolding the red North Dakota clay. Out of all the hazards we pass through in amazement, all the stories we tell of luck and good fortune and prayer and survival, it is always our own lungs that dry up and darken, our own miles that straighten, our own hunger that wanes. The Lord gives us mountains, and we fail to mine out that grandness. The Lord gives us trains, and we waste those distances transporting coal. Some say we are broken. Some say the good Lord has forsaken our dreams. But I say it is our own throat that grows the cancer, our own asthma that blackens our breath to a wheeze. And the truth is, the mile-long train will always crawl past. The socket-fixed gaze of the owl's skull will always turn perfectly backwards. We will always be bodies among ghosts. And what is important to them is not how we ride on the westbound freighter, not how we shiver, not how we crawl crooked and thin and climb yet again into the trembling eye hole. It is not about suffering. It is not about fear. We must peer out from inside the owl's eye. Watch the coal dust cook in the wind eddies. Watch it linger. Watch it spiral thinly as it bruises the blue-faded mind of the buffalo sky. We must be the pupil that swells in the coming darkness. The cargo worth carrying across the distances. Thank you.
Thank you, Anders. Our next reader, Nick Cox, for 19 years worked as a food label consultant. He says the work paid well, but was soulless and deadening. And then the birth of his first son, Stephen, taught him a valuable lesson. Life is precious. Time is precious. He moved to Blacksburg, Virginia to pursue his MFA at Virginia Tech. His short stories and essays have appeared in Black Warrior Review, the Florida Review, Mid-American Review, and the Nervous Breakdown. He was awarded a McDowell Fellowship, earned a few Pushcart Prize nominations, and his current endeavors pay less well than his food labeling gigs, but he says that he is happy now. Everybody, please welcome Nick.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming and also inviting me here. I was telling people earlier, this is easily the most gorgeous place I've ever lived in my life. Thanks, everyone. And also thanks to Chris. He was the managing editor of the issue, and I was the total butthead contributor who kept on making change after change after change on his manuscript. And Chris, God bless him, reached out and said, great. If the roles were reversed, I probably would have just got pretty mad at myself. I'm going to read a section of my story that's in this issue called The Last American Tiger. It's a longer story, so I've cobbled together a few portions of it. There's a couple of strands going through it, and the main story, this is just on one strand. The Last American Tiger prowls the suburbs in pimped-out Escalades, stalking foreclosed townhomes and other articles of the dispossessed. Half feline and half guile, he's a master of disguise, a shapeshifter, adept at changing identities and passports to perpetrate his evils. Wherever misery lurks, he's sure to be found. He's the nefarious cultural forces that hook our kids on crack and crystal meth, and whatever else they're smoking up the pipes nowadays. And he's the wind whispering unchaste thoughts into the ears of our virginal daughters. Single-handedly, he's bulldozed wetlands and paved them over for parking lots. Lately, he's been gorging himself on toddlers. Hiding in the flowering ragweed, he stalks them out at the far edge of the playground. Like all successful predators, he hunts the weak and gimpy, for those are the easiest to ensnare. He crouches in the tall grasses, edging closer. The children are small, defenseless, young enough they have yet to shed their milk teeth. They rush down the slides, throwing mulch at each other, for that is what children do when left unattended, misbehaving vaguely acceptable fashions. 3-year-old Jimmy Twitter picks up a discarded jump rope And imagine himself a cowboy. He swings the rope over his head as if it were a lasso. What he wants to do is lasso a bucking bronco, but none are in the vicinity. And when he swings the rope, it slips from his grip and sails towards the jungle gym. The last American tiger's head jerks up at the sound of that rope pinging against the monkey bars. The ruff of his neck is white, and as the last American tiger sniffs the air, it is the white fur that Jimmy sees flapping about like the dried fluff on a dandelion gone to seed. He has never before seen a tiger, not even in a zoo. A tiger's ivory teeth are the largest of all the big cats, designed to slash into the raw flesh of hoofed mammals. He bares his teeth as he lunges into Jimmy Twitter, but what dazzles Jimmy most is the astounding whiteness of its neck fur. How white it is, he thinks. Last American tiger sightings abound. Down in the grocery market, he's roaming the aisles with a price sticker gun, jacking up the costs of gallon jugs of milk and cans of pork and beans. Up close, he's even bigger than we've imagined. He's a muscular brute, nurtured on a diet of poor huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Contrary to the popular adage, the last American tiger changes his stripes regularly. Sometimes he's in pinstripes, sometimes chalk stripes. At night, after we've locked our children securely in their bedrooms, we hear sounds outside. The wind, we tell ourselves. Or just the raccoons knocking over the trash can. But really, who are we kidding? Parting the curtains, we see an orange figure crouched behind the shrubs. Just as we're tuckering out for the night, there's a knock on the front door. Don't answer it, our wives say, pulling tight their house coats. Please, honey, don't answer it. But we, the men of Duxbury County, are not likely to listen to our wives when something as crucial as home security is concerned. So we peep into the peephole and spy no one. We open the door a crack. Anyone there, we stutter? A hand pushes through the doorway, causing us to jump back in fright. Then we see the woman who is attached to the hand that's now trying to yank open our door. She's wearing a red convenience store uniform, and it's like she's been standing there all night. A scar runs the length of her cheek, and though she can't be long out of high school, her face has the weathered look of someone much older. Please don't close the door on me, she says, jamming her foot into the doorway to prevent us from doing so. She smells of cigarettes and nacho cheese sauce, but not enough of Ira to make her smell unattractive. Yet we are cautious. The last American tiger has been known to take on many forms, many shapes. In times of great peril, it's best to be prudent. We narrow our eyes. You're him, aren't you? We ask. Who? The last American tiger, that's you. She lets out a confused laugh. Well, are you? Oh, good. Now would you please, and because we are polite, this is the word we emphasize, will you please remove your foot from our door and leave? I would, but what? Listen, she says, you haven't seen my boy around anywhere, have you? We notice suddenly the name patched on her red convenience store uniform, Mary Lou Twiddle. Because I haven't seen him around anywhere, and I've been looking everywhere, calling his name. Here, Jimmy, come to Mommy. Her eyes are glassy, and then they are wet. And then she shudders, unleashing tears. We can barely look at her, so heavy is her anguish. The scar that grooves her cheek becomes a rivulet through which tears flow. 5 days after the mauling, it astounds us that no one has told her. I've been knocking on doors all day, she says, just hoping. We cannot bear to tell her, for the acknowledgement of horror is not within our skill set. So we ask her to explain her son. What was he wearing in the last scene? And how might we recognize him should we happen to see him limping down our street? Not that our tree-lined neighborhood is particularly overrun with gimpy toddlers, we say, but we need an accurate description if we wish to avoid filling her hopes with sightings that ultimately prove false. Her face brightens. She recalls for our benefit his dimple-filled smile and how bananas are his favorite food. Have you looked there, we ask? She straightens her shoulders. Where? The banana store. The banana store? Or wherever it is they sell bananas. The supermarket, maybe. At the banana counter. Oh my God, I should have thought about that. The desperation yields from her voice. She gives herself to the magical notion that her son has been fawning over bananas for these last few days, just staring at them. Well then, you better fetch him. And then we do something that surprises ourselves. We reach into our billfold and extract a crisp new dollar bill. We, the men of Duxbury County, are generous people. She clasps her hands to her chest, a plastic pink fluorescent ring, like what might come out of a gumball machine, loose on her pinky finger. We tuck the dollar bill into her folded hands. Go buy one of those bananas for us, we say. Thank you.
Our next reader is Ms. Jill Talbot, is the author of a memoir, Loaded, as well as the co-editor of The Art of Friction, where non-fictions come together, and editor of Meta Writings Toward a Theory of Nonfiction. Her work has been published or is forthcoming from Brevity, Diagram, Ecotone, the Paris Review Daily, The Rumpus, and Under the Sun. She is currently the Elma Stuckey Writer-in-Residence in Creative Nonfiction at Columbia College, Chicago. Everybody please welcome Jill Talbot.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. After living in New York and Chicago for the past 3 years, it is so great to come down here and let my Texas out. It's also an honor for me to meet Kristen Iverson for the first time, even though we have worked together before. And I want to add that not only have I taught her work, but I gave her the last position in Meta Writings because it was a position that was incredibly earned because of her articulation of nonfiction and persona and the way in which we essay. So it's great to meet you and it's great to be a part of this evening. I'm going to read Stalled, which is the essay, You Nice People Were Good Enough to Publish. I like to live on corners, to position myself at the intersection of directions and indecisions. I understand repetition, ritual, the pause before going on, passing through. I even understand turning around and going back again. Like the way I've already written about that house in Utah, but I've left something out and need to go back to it again, where I will find myself answering a phone call. It is the end of July, and I'm in the middle of the floor next to the crib, waiting to hear the slowed rhythm of Indy's breaths. She shifts in the crib, fights sleep. The tiny lamp on in the corner, the glow in the room, a whisper. I stretch out on my back, look up at the ceiling, the slats of wood painted wide. I rented this house over the phone. When the landlord told me it was on the corner, I told him I'd send a deposit that afternoon. From the window of the room, I can see the garden of the elderly woman who lives next door. A blue truck sits in front of her house, always parked at the curb. It was her husband's truck. He has been dead a year. I once wrote about a blue truck I bought with money from a poetry prize. And I wrote how I watched for its lights to pull into the parking lot from the third floor window during the middle of those nights he wouldn't come home. I wrote about that truck pulling away on a Sunday morning and how, for the rest of the months I lived in Boulder, my breath caught, if I ever passed or pulled up behind a truck, that shade of blue. When I moved to the house in Utah and saw that blue truck parked next door, I kept expecting to see it to pull away, but weeks passed, it never moved. When a neighbor told me it belonged to the man who lived next door for 56 years before dying in April, I could afford the stasis, understood the metonymy of a blue truck. In that house in Utah, I wrote at the same desk that had fit below the bookshelf in the basement apartment where he and I lived together in Fort Collins, the desk that overlooked the river outside our spare bedroom in Boulder, the desk in the corner of our living room in the last apartment we shared. During those 3 years in Utah, I never found a good place for the desk. I'd slide it from the window to the side wall in the front room, and eventually I dragged it by a window in my bedroom. Then I moved it to an opposite wall. That's the last place I remember it being. When I wrote there, I'd get up from the desk mid-paragraph and wander into the living room, stand at the front window and watch the rain, thinking of the next line, thinking of him. When I hear the eased rhythm of Indy's breathing, I stand up in the slowest of motions, in case this is not sleep, in case it's just the moment before, when the slightest move will cause her to stir. Sit up. If she wakes, the winding down must start all over. It's like runners who get halfway down the track before being called back because of a false start. When I see her arms above her head in surrender, I take slow steps out of the room and toward the kitchen to begin my evening. I pull the heavy bottle of Chardonnay from the bottom shelf of the refrigerator. As the night dissolves, I pour glass after glass, empty a bottle, uncork another. Eventually, I move to the front porch with my glass and the bottle, assume my nightly position on the top step where I'll be stalled until 3 a.m. I know it will be 3 because that's when the automatic sprinklers turn on in the front yard. I watch the streams crisscross the lawn, the sidewalks darken. In the dark, the blue truck, a shadow. At some point, I go into the house to get my phone, but I won't remember this. Months after he moved out of our apartment in Boulder, he called me from a motel room, somewhere in Colorado, but he wouldn't say where. He told me he had driven until he felt far away enough to see if distance could make his decision. I had not known until that night he wasn't gone all the way, that there was a chance he might return. He told me he was sitting in a chair and he was going to stay there all night and feel which way his heart pulled, toward me or the woman I saw only once, walking down the sidewalk. I willed myself to increase my gravity, to reach through all the distant towns and dark highways and find him in that chair wherever it was and pull him home. But he didn't come back and he didn't stop calling, so the two of us stayed at the intersection of our indecision. Eventually, I drove myself west to Utah to live. It still wasn't enough distance. One afternoon, I opened the top drawer of my writing desk and felt a heavy shift, watched the drawers of the right side collapse. I stood back to accept what seemed a fitting end. Then I took all the papers, postcards, and envelopes, all of the desk loosened, broke free. Nothing within me shifted. Not long after, he called from a bar to tell me someone had just played Please Come to Boston on the jukebox. I could hear it through the phone. Our song. The one about asking someone to come to Boston for the springtime, to Denver with the snowfall, to LA to live forever. I knew every word, but I had no way to follow this new song he had started singing. The one with the part about calling me during the day, asking how I liked the new town. If a TV station showed Frasier at 10:30, the way it did in Colorado when I'd watch it every night, he told me it comforted him, knowing where I was every night at 10:30. I knew he was not bound to rituals the way I was, so I had no way of grounding him in any place, at any time. Please come to Utah. He just said no. But that's not the phone call I always hear myself answering. It's the one the morning after the night I went back into the house to grab my phone, the call I don't remember making. The phone is ringing, and I look at the number and see his name. In that instance, a scene from the night. Sprinklers running and me speaking into the phone, spilling myself all over the steps of the porch and out to the yard of my longing. The sun in my room like a neighbor who witnessed the whole thing through parted drapes, and I wince at what I might have said in the middle of the night, in the middle of the second bottle. It feels like I'm in the middle of nowhere, as if all the directions I have ever written down are wrong. I wonder if he is about to tell me he's on his way to Utah, on his way to us. I press the green button to answer, press my other hand to my heavy head. Yesterday, I turned 23. Nothing has changed or feels like it ever will. When he says, Jill, it is stern, angry, the voice he uses when someone else is in the room. I understand my message has been listened to, but not by him. I assure him that no, I will not call again. Yes, I understand. I cannot do this anymore. And then he says what I never needed to hear, that he loves the woman who is in the room. Indy's muffled cries begin, and they grow louder as she comes out of sleep. I tell him I have to go, that I will not bother him anymore. When he says goodbye, I note a shift in his voice. I know I will always remember it as the last day of July, the first day of my 34th year, and the last day of his living halfway between me and another woman. Thank you.
Our last reader, Mr. Abraham Smith, hails from Ladysmith, Wisconsin. During his winters, he is an instructor of English at the University of Alabama, and during his summers, he is a farmhand at Hawks Highland Farm. He received his MFA in poetry from the University of Alabama in 2004, and since then, he has authored 4 full-length poetry collections and 2 chapbooks. His poems have appeared in the American Poetry Review, Jubilat, Fence, and Denver Quarterly, among others. His works have also been anthologized in the Volta Book of Poets. Tuscaloosa Writes This, and Taos Poetry Circus, the 90s. His poetry performances are featured in a recent Huffington Post article by Seth Abramson titled, "Why is Contemporary Poetry So Good?" Everybody, please welcome Abraham Smith.
Pleasure to be here and a dreamy journal to be a part of, and an honor to share the amplifying device with these 3 wonders. Here's the one that's in the Squinchy Pinch, number 35. Friends, when you're hungover as bog water in a bag with a hole in it, and lands that haul is long, one job forever, peel them 30 worm-girt apples with naught but your fingernail. Skin and refusal of skin, see nail and skin love too much. Saw there is no entrance to the body there. Sweet hurt, bird city. There's the number 35. And now I'll do a couple out of this, which is all about, pardon me, I've got a little something creeping up in my throat. I'm reminded of that James Agee moment in Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, when the man tilts his head back and screams like a green branch. So said James Agee. I feel like I may be about to scream chlorophyll here. So anyway, pardon my fog, but I'll hoot number 1 in this shiny, happy situation, and then the epilogue. Thanks again for having me. Here's number 1. It's about ears. Mine are pointy, kind of Keeblery, so I figured I'd better write about There's an assignment, a workshop assignment. Write about your damn lobes. Okay. Number 1. It's not that true that ears are can openers and we cut the world's circle open according to some universal prescribed canal ideal. No, you can train yourself to hear the groat of envy fall on seeming solar ash birds. See, all birds are born to a striped logic, a stringed line of charts and charms. And they are what they are, the one they are, by saying same, span the span. That's their reach, way fire undresses the world, addresses the lie of the whole. And so if I'm thinking one thing, legs bend way we do down a hill. It is, what bird is that, and what would I, if ever I could cut one thing? If my knee were in that one thing forever fateless, call that what cheese you wish. It matters me a great deal. Let this Swiss door, sack glass, let sound lie, I know no door. And then I'll do this last one, which is about, sort of about being an altar boy a little bit, in a way. I was a funeral altar boy in the Our Lady of Sorrows Catholic Church, so I loved it when people in my town died. I was like, I'd be sitting in class, and all of a sudden the door would whoosh open, and they'd be like, is Abraham, is it? Yes, somebody is dead. And then I would get out of class for half of the day, and then the people would give me a $2 or $5 bill, and I would sprint across the street to the Benjamin Franklin grocery store and buy chocolate. So anyway, yeah. So anywho, this is a little longer, but we'll get through it, and then off to the wine. Let's see. Pardon me, there's a curse word and we're number 4, so shut your ears here. Let's see, stick a can opener in there. Here we go. Back before the new asshole father with an anger management issue, after they shipped the other father who was gentle and kind, talked like he was talking about a silent movie on a telephone, on the radio, in a silent movie. They shipped him out by the Polish, for he was boning his secretary who would one day blow herself away with his elk hunting rifle. Back before Father Anger would not let my mother take communion for the divorces, she would read sometimes a passage like an angel and always bring me back. People ask me, no poem raps the miser's knuckle on the bridge of the nose, or more sensitive the eye about what I remember when going to bed, an automatic pre-dream of small boulders that pushed against my small palms, but with the weight of real boulders, impossible skin fail against such heavies, and then maybe I could not sleep for a little while the worry visited with me, like the father heavy of snuff and brandy, the sick man of the unbeliever. You can do that sort of thing when you're talking over praying for yourself, really heavy of corned beef, light of toast, heavy margarine, in the days before real butter was advertised, with Mary, very confident, best neighbor I ever had would jump your car, but otherwise stay out of your hair, glee cows again. And I remember alone in the woods, the chickadee, my only friend. Don't laugh, the chickadee did, though nature didn't deny me. And my mother back at our pew, because I was too small to take it, she would have saved a small piece in her mouth. She must have minced it around the way later I was taught not to. And then she produced the Jesus toast, a sail of a fingernail after a whale of a tropical storm. She hold it out to me on the pad of her right index. Maybe she drunk the stormy blooded Christ too. Yes, she had. Also, there were Indians in the library, and I felt right among them. I don't know how I got it off her because it clung, but I did get and put the little warm triangle, like the bit of eggshell in the egg. You curse in the pan before the heat carries it over. It's good for what it's good for. There's hard and soft, etc., and calcium mouth warm as the right and left hands of lovers tangled pretty like two halves of a clam with a flashlight flash all ghost flash on the grass path to the river on a warm night. Why I put a flashlight in there? My mother, their wine, way May and June, all day the next minutes. Church, you do count time. Ticket, I had worked for yours, and I was on vacation, and I was the guy. Sold you the machine that drilled the holes in bowling balls. Special vacuum too to get at that drill dust is finer than the silk kerchief thrown up 80 times by a cow. Green, naked women on a private movie channel in a rented room, so near the big wash you could hear the salt-stunned glass bay I had had the name for since second grade, run through ropes of water, happy and so far from thinking thinking Southern Cali had hip-watered lawns in 1980. It is crazy, but they were right here, closer than I behaved, like Pawpaw, his worst every day, as in flip off the driver and squeal stud man, that water must hurt good, ropes of coal run, toe run, kid run to feel the world something you balance on. Not old guy checks his bank account every half a dozen day. Their small smokehead hands kept pushing down, sweet old hissing down. Invisible straw hula skirts kept riding up to Juicy 222 hands kept inverse tulip gentle light, pulling smoke out of skin, kept pushing down legs, down off their legs, unless their knee, thigh, lest all of it crawled up on their hips, and they'd have had to walk on faces by wink lovingly, because happy and running and laughing and naked and green. Thank you.
Another round of applause for all of our readers. Thank you for making this trip out here. Really appreciate it. On behalf of the Prince thank you very much. Everybody, that concludes the reading portion of tonight's program. So go ahead, get yourself some free booze, some free food, have yourself some free fun, and thank you very much for showing up.